He didn't go into the forest that morning looking to save anything, but the forest had other plans, and so did a creature no bigger than his fist, trembling alone in the silence where her mother used to be. Daniel Reyes was 53 years old, and Saturday mornings belonged to him. Same trail, same thermos, same worn boots. The Blue Ridge Forest in October had that particular stillness, pine and wet earth, pale light filtering through the canopy. He wasn't looking for anything unusual. He never was. He heard her before he saw her, a sound so thin it barely existed, high-pitched, broken, wrong in the way that makes the hairs on the back of your neck rise before your brain catches up. He stopped walking, stood still, let the forest settle. It came again, from somewhere behind a tangle of storm-fallen oak. He pushed through without thinking too hard about it. She was tucked in the crook of a rotting log, spotted fur damp with morning mist, eyes still carrying that cloudy blue of the very young, a bobcat kitten, maybe 4 weeks old. She opened her mouth and called again, that threadbare sound impossibly small for these woods, impossibly large for how much it needed to be heard. Daniel crouched slowly. She didn't run, she didn't have the strength. What he didn't notice right away was the silence around her. No rustle in the brush, no low maternal warning from a cautious distance. Bobcat mothers don't abandon their young. Not willingly, not ever. The forest wasn't just quiet, it was empty in a specific way. The kind of empty that doesn't come from absence, but from loss. He knew he should leave her. Every trail guide said so. Wildlife needs space. Mothers return. He knew all of it. He stood up, looked back toward the path, and stayed in that in-between place, the one between knowing better and doing what the moment asked of him. She called again. Daniel had sat in hospital waiting rooms. He had stood at grave sites in the rain. He knew the difference between a sound that could wait and one that couldn't. He unzipped his jacket. She crawled toward his warmth with a certainty that seemed too large for her tiny body. He cupped her gently, felt the rapid flutter of her heartbeat against his palms, and tucked her against his chest. She went still almost immediately. Not the stillness of fear, the stillness of something that has finally found what it was searching for. He stood slowly, looked around one last time. The trees held their quiet. He started back down the trail, walking the same path he always walked, but carrying something entirely new. The wildlife rehabilitator's name was Carol Whitman, and she had seen enough rescues to know when a bond had already gone too far. She examined the kitten on her kitchen table with practiced hands, checking weight, hydration, eyes, limbs, while Daniel sat across from her, jacket still zipped, the kitten still pressed against his chest. Every time Carol reached for her, the kitten curled deeper into the fabric. Carol didn't force it, she just looked at Daniel with the measured expression of someone choosing their words carefully. "She's imprinted on you," she said. "It happens fast at this age, faster than most people expect."
Daniel asked what that meant. Carol pulled a chair and sat down. She explained it plainly, the way she explained everything. No softening, no dramatization. If the kitten bonded too deeply to a human presence, her instincts would dull. She wouldn't learn to hunt, wouldn't learn to fear the things she needed to fear. She would survive in captivity and fail in the wild. The window for a successful release was narrow, and it was already moving. "You can't be her comfort," Carol said. "You can help her survive, but you cannot be what she runs to." Daniel nodded, said he understood. He didn't, not fully.
"Not yet."
Carol agreed to take the kitten into her rehabilitation program. She had the facilities, the experience, the permits, but she needed Daniel's help. Bottle feedings 3 times a day for the first 2 weeks, gradually reduced. She would train him. He would follow the protocol. Minimal eye contact, no talking directly to her, no holding her against his chest. He tried. The first feeding he kept his eyes down, held the bottle at a clinical distance, stayed quiet the way Carol instructed. The kitten drank hungrily, her tiny paws braced against his forearm. When she finished, she pressed her nose against his wrist and exhaled, a small warm breath, completely trusting. And Daniel sat very still and stared at the ceiling and told himself this was the right thing. The second week was harder than the first. The third week harder still. She was growing. Her spots sharpened, her legs lengthened. She moved through Carol's yard with increasing confidence, stalking shadows, pouncing at leaves, practicing the ancient grammar of predators in miniature. She was becoming what she was supposed to be.
Daniel watched through the fence some mornings and felt something complicated move through him. equal parts pride and loss, tangled together in a way he couldn't separate. Carol watched him watching her one afternoon and said quietly, "The ones who care too much always have the hardest time." Daniel kept his eyes on Sage. "Yeah," he said, "I'm starting to understand that. Nobody tells you what it feels like to love something back toward wildness, to watch it slip away from you, and call that success." The rehabilitator's name was Carol, and she had been doing this work for 22 years. She told Daniel plainly one morning, standing in the yard where the kitten, now 6 weeks older, now almost unrecognizable, paced the edge of her enclosure with new muscle and restless instinct, "It's time to start letting go." The kitten had a name by then, though Carol had warned him about that too. He'd called her Sage. He wasn't sure why. It felt right the way some things just do. Sage had changed. The softness was still there, but underneath it now was something older, something inherited. She no longer crawled toward him automatically. She watched him from a distance first, the way wild things watch, measuring, deciding. Some mornings she came to the fence when he arrived, others she didn't. Carol said that was good. Daniel stood at the fence on those mornings and told himself she was right. The hardest day wasn't the one he expected. It was an ordinary Tuesday. He arrived at Carol's property the way he always did, thermos in hand, boots still carrying trail mud. He called softly the way he always did. Sage was at the far end of the enclosure, crouched low in the grass, her eyes fixed on something moving beyond the tree line. A bird maybe, a shadow. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she didn't turn around. He stood there for a long moment. The October light was the same as the morning he found her. Pale, filtered, quiet. He watched her watch the world beyond the fence, her body coiled with an attention that had nothing to do with him anymore. Something moved through his chest. Not quite grief, not quite pride. Something that didn't have a clean name. He thought about his daughters, grown now and living their own lives in their own cities. He thought about the particular ache of loving someone well enough to release them, how that never gets easier, how maybe it isn't supposed to. Carol came to stand beside him quietly. "She's ready," she said. Daniel nodded, kept his eyes on Sage, still crouched, still watching that far tree line, still reaching toward something he could not give her. "I know," he said. He didn't leave right away. He stood there a little longer, memorizing the way she looked in that light, wild and whole and completely, beautifully unaware of him. That was the moment he understood what saving something really meant. Release day came on a Friday morning in late November, when the Blue Ridge wore its first frost and the tree line stood sharp against a pale gray sky. Daniel met Carol at the trailhead before sunrise. He carried nothing except his thermos and the quiet weight of knowing this was the last time. Sage rode in a carrier in the back of Carol's truck, still now, the way animals go still when they sense something significant is happening. Daniel didn't look through the grate the way he usually did. He kept his eyes on the road and let the miles pass in silence. They chose a release site deep in the forest, far from roads, far from hunters, far from anything that carried risk. Carol had scouted it twice. Good cover, strong prey population, water nearby, everything a young bobcat needed to build a life. Daniel listened to her explain it and nodded and understood that she was talking about Sage's future, a future that existed entirely without him in it. They carried the carrier together to the edge of a wide clearing where the tree line thickened into shadow. Carol unlatched the door and stepped back. Daniel stepped back further. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Sage moved. Slowly at first, one cautious paw on the frost-stiffened grass, then another. She lowered her nose to the ground and breathed in the world. Cold earth, dead leaves, pine resin, wind. Her ears rotated forward, her body lengthened. Everything soft fell away, and what remained was pure instinct, ancient and clean and exactly as it was always meant to be. She crossed the clearing without looking back. At the tree line she paused, just for a moment. Her head turned, not fully toward him but enough, a half glance, unhurried, unburdened. Then she stepped into the shadows and was gone. Daniel stood in the clearing for a while, after Carol walked back to the truck. The frost was melting slowly in the pale morning light. A woodpecker worked somewhere deep in the pines. The forest made its ordinary sounds, indifferent and eternal, the same sounds it had been making long before either of them arrived. He thought about the man who had walked into these woods 7 weeks ago, looking for an hour of silence. He thought about how sometimes the thing you didn't know you needed finds you before you think to go looking for it.
He wasn't the same man. He couldn't have said exactly what had changed or where the shift had happened, only that something that had been sitting heavy in him for a long time had quietly lifted, somewhere between a rotting log and a frost-covered clearing, between a sound too small for these woods and a silence that somehow felt full. He zipped up his jacket against the cold and walked back into the forest.